Big thank you to the whole team of Passive House Accelerators. But as well, I want to say a big thank you to all my former students and everybody that helped me to put this together. The last months I've spent my time on finding out what is actually happening. Why are everybody saying why Passive House is more expensive and where we at actually? And this work that I put here together is over like hundreds of hours of myself and other people out there. And I see a lot of Australian fellas down there. They're looking from down up to you. Change comes from bottom up. That's what we're doing from Australia. So that's what's happening here. So thank you for your feedback. Thank you for the information that you provided me. And I looked at so much data over the last months. I looked at Australian statistics like cost developments over the last 20 years, like of energy costs, then housing, household expenditures, what has been happening over the last 20+ years, and mortgage costs. So I looked at all that stuff and I tried to put it together. Then this big discussion started, like $2,500 per square meter. For you guys that are speaking in feet, that are still using body parts for measurements, just ditch one digit. So out of that 2,500, you make 250, then you have your feet cost. Yeah, that's how much the feet cost. So 2,500 was this big discussion in the current market. It's not possible, but Simone, I don't know if she's here today. She has one project with 2,550 in the making right now, and one for 2,600. I got feedback of people that are doing their own house for $1,150 a square meter, so $115 a square foot. Yeah, for you guys in the US. And I got so many other costs of 1,850, a few in them, like 3 or 4, and then a lot of square meter prices of $2,200 or lower. So 2,500 is a really realistic figure, even in the current market, if we're making the right design decisions. And that's what we're discussing today. Then as well, we have to be super careful not to mix up additional features with passive house costs. Yeah, it's a big one that is done the whole time. We don't want to mix that up. The presentation together, because I got always this information: passive house is so expensive, passive house is so expensive. But is it really that expensive? And what if passive house is not costing more? What if we can actually show that passive house is not costing more, and what would we have to do that is not costing us more? So yeah, like before I said, I'm Daniel Kress, and I want to present now my presentation on does passive house cost the world? As a little bit an introduction of what we're going through. First, I got a little introduction of me and my company. Then we speak shortly about our current situation. Then we go into passive house. What is passive house? Shortly, then the passive house economics, the passive house project costs, and then does passive house limited design, and then conclusions. Today, we can only really talk about the conclusions. I can't really give you the information of how I came to that information because we have only half an hour, and I want to show you how we can actually make the figures work instead of where the figures are coming from. Generally speaking, my informations are normally seen as information overload. So it may feel, like I already said earlier, taking a drink from a fire hose. Yeah. For people that want to know more about it and want to get more details, there is an article coming out in Build It, page 2021 next week. In that magazine, you have an article of this explained in words. And as well, on the 13th of April, I'm doing a passive house in Australia, is it too expensive webinar, where I'm going into more details where the numbers come from. Yeah, so that's as a little information. That little QR code there is the link. This slide comes at the end again. So if you think, oh, I want to know more, it's coming again. So good introduction. Like before, I'm Daniel Kress. I started my career in Germany as a carpenter, building eco homes. Then I moved to Ireland, building eco, realized that eco is not sustainable. And then I moved, and then I really looked into sustainable building solutions. Soon I realized that sustainable is not necessarily healthy, and I really dive deep into the passive house world. Then after all this, realizing already that sustainable is not necessarily healthy, I then went to study at Hochschule Karlsruhe in Germany, civil engineering, specializing in building physics and chemistry, and then a Master of Engineering in Canada, where I went into the building science. And then I've done this this EU project comparing building standards to Passive House, and conclusion, Passive House is providing the best results. So it's nothing new, we know that. So Smart Plus is our mission is making our world a better place. We want to empower people to make a difference. That's what we really stand for. What we do is we are on a mission to decarbonize the building industry. So it's not just Passive House, we are thinking bigger. And how we do it, we inspire and lead with passion and love. That's what we do. So our vision, what we're able to do already is building shelters, structural sound, and protecting us from the elements. That's what we're doing right now. But what we really need to address is the healthy indoor air, that's Passive House, comfortable indoor environment, Passive House, sustainable buildings, Passive House, and economical. This is what Passive House is bringing together, and this is why Passive House is the first step. This is not the final end game. This is just the first step. In my opinion, Passive House standard is the lowest standard we should be building to. Yeah, we can't build worse than that. Everything else is not acceptable. So next one, we have to go into energy producer, energy storage, zero energy building, and then real zero energy building. So from the beginning, from cradle to cradle, really that point of view. Then we want to have smart buildings plus energy buildings, so that they're becoming the power stations of the future. And then we're coming to the smart plus buildings. Yeah, that's where we want to go. So current situation. I think people going to the petrol station these days, or gas station for you in the US, are thinking, what the hell is happening here? You may want to consider a few things. Who would like to own a car that needs 10 times less petrol these days? Put a 1 into the chat if you would like to have a car that needs a 1/10 of the energy. Just put into the chat a 1, and then we know we would like to have that. So that's a nice way of interacting with each other. So instead of 10 liters, it's 1 liter on 100 kilometers. And who would be willing to spend, instead of $30,000, $33,000? Who would be willing to do that? Put a 2 into the chat for that one. Yeah. So would you still be willing to spend this $3,000 if it's instead of 10 liters, 5 liters? Please put in a 3 into the chat. Yeah, would you spend still, if it's just cutting your petrol cost by half, an additional 30,000 in your upfront investment? This is exactly what Passive House is offering you. Yeah, Passive House is cutting reduces the conditioning cost by 90%, so it ditches a digit, and that is all for an additional investment of 10%. $3,000 or 30,000 is 10%. That's what Passive House is giving us. If you're looking to the whole domestic fuel consumption, it cuts it to half, and that's that 5 liter to 10 liters, that 10 liters to 5 liters. So this is what Passive House is giving us. Cars are the second biggest investment of our lifetime. The biggest investment of our lifetime is normally our home. Yeah, so buying a building, a house is a major financial investment. It's normally the biggest one of investment of a lifetime for our clients. It's the biggest ongoing costs for the mortgage, fixed. For the running costs, highly fluctuating, what we painfully have to realize these days on the petrol station, and as well with our heating and cooling bill. In the UK, the heating bills went up by 500%, just as a little information in the background. This is the reason why we really have to look to the budget and the value of the investment that we're actually putting together. Passive House, the reason I'm putting Passive House in there is a lot of people don't know that. A lot of people always argue Passive House is not economical. Passive House is not economical. It's far too expensive. But when we look to the history of Passive House, we actually know that Passive House comes from an economical side. Like Wolfgang Feist wasn't a rich guy. He didn't have that money to spend. Yeah, like he really had to find that money. And he looked at the situation that we had in the 80s. And he realized that 1/3 of the non-renewable energy consumed is from conditioning our houses. 1/3 of the energy consumed was non-renewable energy. And that's conditioning, so we can address that. This is the reason why he built his first passive house with 4 units in 1991. And the additional investment, if you translate it, it was $67,000 for each unit. And these 3 families, he had no, like he didn't know these people. There wasn't a friendship. It was people that said, yeah, we're taking that risk. We're believing in your craziness, that this actually works. Yeah, so it needed to be affordable from day one. And the idea of affordability has been in the Passive House standard from day one. Back in the day, there were no triple glazings out there. There was they didn't know if the thermal insulation works, and heat recovery ventilation systems as we have them today were not existing either. If you want to read a little bit more about it and how he was already giving us information, or like already saying that with Russia, how dangerous it is, here the Passive House blog with a link to that interview where I'm referring to. Then next one, efficiency first. How much tea lights would we need for a 15 square meter room? Put it into the chat. How many tea lights? 15 square meters is 150 square foot. Yeah, so 15 square meter bedroom. How many tea lights? Put it into the chat. How many tea lights you think it is? 1, 10, 100, 1,000, 2, 10. Yeah, 1, 5, 15.0. 1.5. It's 5 tea lights. So it's normally 3 tea lights per square meter. Yeah, so that's good to know. Every 3 tea lights per square meter. So 10 square foot is 3 tea lights. So 1 tea light every 3 square foot, 3.5 square foot, something like that. Yeah, so the most sustainable energy is the one not used. Keep that in mind. And that's what we're doing. And it's very important is to remember, despite the location or climate, Passive House is defined for the consumption of the building. And this is not climate dependent. In any climate, if you're building in Alaska or you're building in Texas, it's the same energy consumption. Yeah, we're designing the building to it. So let us be a bit smarter than NASA. Like NASA had this Mars climate orbiter. And they had this problem that they did this little mistake of metric to imperial. Yeah, and they lost 328 million US dollars back in the day. Yeah, so mission failure because of not translating the numbers properly. So let us look at that a little bit. One square meter, like I said already, is about 10 square foot. We just need to multiply it by 10. Square foot sounds for me more like a condition than a measurement, but it's what you're using. So you need to multiply by 10 from a square meter. And when we speak about dollars per square meter, if you want to know per square foot, you need to divide by 10. Yeah, and this signs will come up again and again. So this is a square meter, $10. And now when we look at a square meter, and how many foot are in there? There's 10 square foot in there, and every foot is $1. Yeah, so I try to make it visual for you guys to understand this relation between foot and like metric and imperial. And we mainly talk about only square meterage and dollars, and that's the reason why these numbers work that way. So here, Passive House is from tiny for high rise. So we can build passive houses from 30 square meters to 18,426 square meters, no problem. So now you need to multiply by 10. So it's 184,000 square foot. And that is where Passive House is possible. Passive House is as well possible for cities. So we have this in Heidelberg, in Germany, but as well China with these massive offices. China, 1.2 million square meters, so that's 12 million square foot. And in Germany, it's more than 100,000 square meters. Good. Passive house is comfort with clear conscience. Yeah, so passive houses are normal buildings just built better. The additional cost is $250 to $750 per square meter. So that would be $25 to $75 per square foot, to give you that idea. This is equivalent to an additional cost of 5 to 20% in residential. In commercial, it is often as little as 1%. So that was just a little introduction to the whole thing. So let us start with the economics. So passive house is economical. So the additional investment is 0 to 20%. In low quality buildings, it's rather 20%. In high end buildings, it's rather 1%. Usually $200 to $750 per square meter, like we just said already, and that put into figures. If you're having a square meter rate of $250 on my project that I will look at later with $384 per square meter, it's 15%. Medium quality 5,000, 8%. High quality 5%. So the additional cost will stay the same for the same building, but the finishes are different. The detailing is different, and that is not additional passive house cost, and that's the reason why the percentage goes down, but the dollars per square meter stays the same. So it's passive house is the lowest hanging fruit with the smallest green premium. It's even a negative in the long run because we're getting a return of investment. That means it's negative green premium. So this is the project that we are looking at. It's a 125 square meter building, so 1,250 square foot, 3 bedrooms, 23 square meter of windows. The additional investment for the passive house is $48,000. That's like 21 for the design part, 24,000 for the thermal envelope, and 6,000 for the building services. The windows were less than $10,000. Less than $10,000 for the whole building glazed. 4 years ago, I wouldn't even got I just get a double slider window for that. Now I'm getting the whole building glazed for that. So that pricing is going down, 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 down. This comes to a square meter rate of $384 in this project. Passive house savings. So what do we save? We save energy of $1,396 in the first year. And then we are expecting a cost rise of our energy costs by 4.7%. That's the same that we had from 2003 to 2016. The newest data is not available after 2016, so that should come out end of this year. And then passive house additional cost is $48,000. And obviously that's an additional investment. So a loan is required of $48,000, and we are expecting an interest rate of 5%. Currently, the interest rate is between 2 and 5%. So I'm going against passive house. So I'm saying it's expensive to loan money, the highest expenses. Then to be clear, we are comparing here a poorly conditioned house with a temperature swing from 10 degrees to 32 degrees to a passive house that is always between 20 and 25 degrees. Yeah, so this is important to know that we're comparing it to that. We are applying no real interest rate. So we are applying the actual interest rate. In other words, this 4.7 with the inflation we're having right now of 3.25% in Australia, it would be always a real interest rate of 1.45% upfront. So let us now come to what are the findings. If you're comparing a passive house to a conventional house, and we're only looking at the running costs, we're saving $266,000 over 50 years. This is like comparing a passive house to a conventional house in the building costs. Obviously, passive house is clearly winning here. If you're looking to the building cost, the passive house costs $48,000 more. However, that $48,000 to the $266,000 is not, we can't compare them directly. We need to put them into a relation. Like $266,000 today is not $266,000 in 50 years. Having money in your pocket or know you're getting paid in the future is something different, right? Yeah, if you're having money in your pocket, you can pay for your food, but if you run out of money before the month is over, you can't pay for your food. That's the reason why we can't really compare them. So let us put them into the equation like we learned it in the Passive House Designer course. The 4.7% of energy price increase. The yellow line is just the energy costs of a passive house. The green line is including, the green columns is including the loan for 30 years. This is the reason why having this massive jump in the 31st year. From 30 to 31st, there's this massive jump because the loan is paid off. Yeah, and this is what it shows us in at the beginning, passive house is costing us more. And then we're coming to the equilibrium at the year 19. And then after 30 years, the loan is paid off and now it drops down. And now we see this big savings of passive house already. So when we put that now into a little bit of figures, in the first year, we spent $1,725 more in a year in a passive house. In the 19th year, the financial burden becomes a financial freedom. In the year 31, we're having already $5,538 more in our pocket. And in the year 50, it's $13,000 more in our pocket. Cash versus profit. Do you rather have cash or profit, guys? One for cash, two for profit. Who when you're running, who here is running a profitable business, but still has a problem with cash flow? So only cash can be spent. We can have a profitable business, but if you don't have the cash, then it doesn't work. So this is the reason we will look more at the cash later on than at the profit. But if you look at the profit side of a passive house, in this example, the profit is in that year 31. That's the first time when we really have everything paid off and we have a return of investment in 31 before we don't have a return of investment. So that's important to know. In this example, it's 30 years. Comparing a conventional house to a passive house with the same sales value. So if you're selling the passive house and the conventional house and they're both for sale and you're getting exactly the same money for that project. Yeah, so again, totally against passive house. But then obviously after that 50 years, we're already having a massive bonus, even if you're looking at the cumulative result. If you're looking at cash basis, that's the financial burden that you experience in the year 1, in the year 2, and year 3. Then we're coming to this. In the first year, the additional daily financial burden is a coffee a day, $4.73. It's $2.70 in the 10th years. In the 19th year, we come to the financial freedom. And in the year 31, we're having a free lunch every single day. Yeah, so this is the costs. If we're having an annual energy cost increase of 4.7%, but you may now say, yeah, 4.7%, what is happening when the energy increase is more? No, it's less. Like if we have less energy increase, so against passive house, then we're coming to this. It's still a coffee a day in the first year. Yeah, and in the 10th year, it's $3.67. So it's now not as good any longer. And instead of $15, we're only having $8.51 in the 31st year. But the highest financial burden is still a coffee a day. The same is happening if the energy prices are going up more extreme than they're going up right now. It's still a coffee a day in the first year, but now we're having $26 in the 31st year. And if it's even going more up, then we're having $34 $34 more in the pocket in the year 31. Good. So the additional investment for passive house is a coffee a day, like I just said already. For a coffee a day, reduction of a coffee a day, you get a healthy building that's sustainable and gives you financial freedom. Now I want to show you another side of the curve, or like another perspective, impact of incentives. So the reason I'm doing that, I hope we have already politicians in this webinar, because incentives really matter. We're having here Bank Australia. They're giving us a discounted interest rate of 0.2% if you're building passive house. So what happens if you're doing this? So if you're having, instead of a 5% interest rate, a 4.8% interest rate, and comparing that now to each other, Now we're coming to that situation that in the first financial year, the $4.73 becomes a $3.46 as a financial burden. In the year 10, the $2.77 is only a $1.50 per day. And then in the year 31, when it is already profitable, it's still the $15. It hasn't changed. If now the government is, instead of giving out a first buyer's loan for nothing, giving first buyer loan incentives in a percentage of interest rates out of a 0.3%, yeah, 2% by the bank, 0.2% by the bank, 0.3% by the government, and we still talk about the $2,500 square meter rate, then it goes down to $1.59 in the first year. And in the second year, it goes down to 37 cents. And then in the 15th year, it's still the $15 more. In the case we're not spending $2,500 on the square meter, we're spending $4,000 in the on the square meter. So high quality buildings. Now we're coming, or like higher quality buildings. Now we're coming to a plus already in the first year. So the passive house is already creating a return of investment from the year one, just because of an incentive by the government of 0.3%. Yeah, if you're now looking at the 10th year, it's $2.25, and in the 31st year, it's still that $15. So in other words, with this incentive, with this government incentive, we could really help people to make that move and making life easier during the loan period, because otherwise it anyway pays. Yeah. So now, does Passive House limit design? Who knows that building? Yeah, so design limitation by Passive House. Nope, there's no design limitation because of Passive House. Passive House does not limit the design. I'm claiming that I can build Sagrada Familia as a Passive House, maybe not in my lifetime, but Gaudio didn't do that either. It's always a question of budget. It's always a question of budget and not of Passive House design. We just need better components to achieve it. Studies show that Passive House can cost up to 20% more. However, architectural features regularly exceed the 30% of building costs. That's your glazed handrails. That's your stainless steel finish here, your shadow gap there. All that things adding costs to the build. This is not Passive House. This is architectural features, and we have to keep them separate. Passive House does not need to be expensive. How big is big enough? One thing that we need to keep in mind, and I want to have it in there just as a reminder for us, Passive House says 30 square meter per person. Learning from tiny house movement, we could achieve that easily, I would say. Smart and good design is giving us that results. In Australia and the US, where we have the biggest houses in the world, Australia here and Canada here, US here, then I think a good compromise might be 50 square meters, so 500 square foot per person might be a good compromise instead of 80 plus square meters per person. So now let us go back to the impact of size, shape, and compactness. The significance of size, shape, and compactness is not understood. This is the reason I want to really show it on that spa home. This freestanding this freestanding two-story build with 125 square meter, 1,250 square foot, has a thermal envelope of 351 square meter. The use factor is now the thermal envelope square meterage divided by the 125 treated conditioned space, 2.81, is an additional Passive House cost of $48,000. And that's now a two-story freestanding building. So if you're now going to building long single-story build, so we put the first story and the second story behind each other. The wide single-story build, we're putting them next to each other, or we're looking at a mid-terraced house. What impact does that have? We're having here now our situation. So our conditioned space is 125 square meter. For the long single-story building, the price goes up from $48,000 to $64,000. Yeah, the wide single-story build, it goes up to $59,000. In the mid-terraced house, it goes down to $26,000 additional costs. Here, we need to see the thermal envelope. The thermal envelope is here 510 square meter. It is here 473 square meter, and here it's only 250 square meter. So these square meterages need to perform, they let exactly the same amount of energy through that 500 square meter, that 470 square meter, and that 250 square meter. They're letting the same amount of energy through as a total, because it's the same building behind that walls, behind that roof, behind that slab. This means my 500 square meter building needs to let only half of the energy through per square meter than my 250 square meters. Okay. Do you understand what I'm saying? In other words, I need twice as much wall that performs as twice as good. I not only need more wall, I need to build the wall better because of my compactness. And this is where the cost effectiveness comes in play if you're not building compact. Yeah, so working with surfaces, not with shapes. I keep saying it over and over again. Yes, we can just build an ugly box. Then it may feel like living in a box, but can we do more? We can just take the same building, put a little bit of paint on it, and it looks already far better. But if you now saved so much money, maybe we can get an artist involved, and maybe we can get our surface look pretty awesome and have a really good thermal envelope. So let us get function right and then make it look pretty. That's what we have to do. So working with surfaces can be materials, can be like different stones, can be a combination out of timber or stone, or it could be shading devices or balconies and garages that are added to the outside, and then it takes the boxy look away. So let us work with surfaces for our children, for our planet. Let us do that. Conclusions. The biggest one of investment for most of our clients is our building. It's the biggest one of investment, and it's the biggest ongoing cost for our mortgage and for our running costs. This is the reason that we really need to think of the budget, of the value of the investment. If you're looking at the bigger picture, we know from 2007, the next report is coming out in 2 months regarding this. Building offers the largest savings potential in all 3 categories. So it's the lowest hanging fruit out there right now, building passive houses compared to anything else out there. This is the reason why we really need to go and build a highly performing building envelope, not just because we want to build passive houses, but because of the future that we want to give. If this was too quick and you want to get more details, please read the article in Build It magazine, or join me on the next webinar on the 13th of April. Let me share the link with you guys. Yeah. So what is the right question? The question is not, is passive house economical, or is passive house creating a return of investment? No, that is not the question. The question is, can we afford not to? Can we stay energy dependent on a nation, on leaders that don't have our values, that don't stand for human rights, for human dignity? Can we keep destroying the planet and let our children figure it out? Because we are not willing to take the risk, because we don't have the courage to stand up for a humanitarian future for us humans, for our biodiversity, for our appliance. The question is, can we afford not to? Thank you.